Welcome to Y-Stick. Tonight you'll spend maybe 4 minutes eating dinner. Less time than it took to microwave it. Your jaw barely has to work. Your gut barely has to work. But the real answer to how you got here is far stranger than a stove. Because for more than 2 million years, none of your ancestors had a stove. No fire. No pot. No knife for most of that time. Just teeth, hands, and whatever the land was willing to give up that day. And somehow, out of that brutal arrangement, came the brain sitting inside your skull right now. So what were they actually eating? Not the campfire mammoth roast image you're picturing. Something much rawer, much harder, much more interesting. Start with the plants, because plants were the foundation, not the side dish. Long before anyone was chasing anything, early hominins were foraging. Roots, tubers, underground storage organs, thick with starch, buried where predators couldn't easily reach them. Digging them up took strength and patience, but the payoff was a dense, reliable calorie source that didn't run away, didn't have a season, and didn't require a spear. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham, at Harvard, has spent decades arguing that these underground foods were the quiet engine behind early human survival. Not glamorous, not dramatic, just consistently there, day after day, whether or not the hunt went well. Think about that for a second. Somewhere a fossil ancestor of yours is on their knees in the dirt, using a sharpened stick to pry a starchy tuber out of hard-packed earth, and this unremarkable act of digging is quietly laying the groundwork for civilization. No one filmed it. No one applauded. It just worked. Then there was fruit when it was in season, and it rarely was for long. Fibrous leaves filled the gap when fruit didn't. Nuts and seeds, cracked open with rocks used as tools before anyone had a word for tool. And insects, termites, grubs, ant larvae, which sounds unpleasant until you remember that a termite mound doesn't require a hunting party, a strategy, or luck. It requires patience and a stick. Efficient, unglamorous, almost embarrassingly available. Your ancestors were not proud eaters. They were successful ones, and those turned out to be different things. Here's the part that tends to surprise people. Meat was on the menu, but it wasn't the daily special. Early hominins were opportunistic, which is a polite way of saying they took what they could get and didn't ask too many questions. Sometimes that meant scavenging a carcass another predator had already opened, cracking bones for the marrow inside, a food source so calorie-dense that some researchers argue it may have mattered more than the meat itself. Sometimes it meant catching small, slow, unambitious animals, lizards, birds, their eggs, anything that couldn't outrun a determined primate. The image of a triumphant mammoth hunt, spears raised against a dying sun, belongs to a much later, much more organized version of humanity. For most of the 2-million-year stretch, the strategy was simpler. Eat what doesn't require winning a fight you might lose. There was water too, and finding it was its own quiet skill, one that shaped where a group could live at all. And there was the constant background calculation every forager was running without ever writing it down. How many calories will this cost me to get, versus how many calories will it give me back? Dig for an hour and find nothing, and you've lost. Dig for an hour and find a tuber the size of your forearm, and you've won, at least for today. Nobody called it a cost benefit. It was just called staying alive, and all of it, every root, every seed, every scrap of raw flesh, had to be chewed. Extensively. This is where the story stops being about food and starts being about your face. Raw food is tough. Cellulose in plant cell walls resists digestion almost by design. Raw meat is rubbery and demands real mechanical work before your stomach ever gets involved. Katherine Zink, a biological anthropologist, ran experiments having people chew raw meat and unprocessed plant foods, timing exactly how much effort it took, and found that our jaw muscles weren't built to handle a diet of unprocessed food efficiently, not without paying a steep cost in time and energy. Her estimates suggest early hominins may have spent several hours a day just chewing. Not eating a meal, chewing one meal, for hours, like a cow that... Your ancestors' skulls tell the same story your jaw muscles do. Look at the fossil record and you'll find heavier jaws, bigger back teeth, and more robust chewing muscles the further back you travel, physical evidence of a species engineered around grinding, not swallowing. Every bite was a small workout. Every meal was a shift at a job nobody applied for. Which raises the obvious question. If food was that hard to eat, how did anyone have energy left over for anything else? Digestion is expensive. The gut is a demanding organ, constantly working, constantly burning calories just to break raw material down into something usable. A body spending that much energy on digestion has less to spend elsewhere. Say, for instance, on a brain. Evolution runs a tight budget, and for most of human history, digestion was eating the whole paycheck. This is where paleoanthropologist Peter Ungar's dental microwear research becomes useful. Tiny scratches and pits on fossil teeth, invisible to the naked eye, studied under a microscope to reveal exactly what a diet was doing to the mouth eating it. Tough, fibrous, unprocessed food leaves its own signature, scored directly into enamel. And that signature shows up again and again across the early human fossil record, species after species, millennia after millennia. The evidence isn't guesswork stitched together from myth. It's written directly onto the teeth, and it has been sitting there this whole time, waiting for someone with a microscope and enough patience to read it. Fossil bones tell a second, quieter story alongside the teeth. Archaeologists studying ancient butchery sites keep finding long bones deliberately smashed open, not carelessly, but precisely at the exact points where marrow sits thickest. Whoever did the smashing knew what they were doing. Marrow is almost pure fat, and fat, to a body burning enormous amounts of energy just to digest its own dinner, is not a luxury. It's a lifeline. Some researchers now suspect that access to marrow, more than access to muscle meat, may have quietly separated the hominins who thrived from the ones who didn't. Here's the twist, though, the part that quietly rewrites the whole story. It wasn't meat that changed everything, despite what every documentary with dramatic hunting footage wants you to believe. It was heat. Rachel Carmody, working in Wrangham's lab, ran a deceptively simple experiment. Feed animals the same food, raw versus cooked, and measure how much energy their bodies actually extracted from each version. Cooking won, decisively, every time. Heat breaks down tough plant cell walls and denatures proteins in meat, doing a huge amount of digestive work before a single bite ever reaches the mouth. Cooked food is, in effect, pre-digested. Your gut inherited the savings, and it has never once thanked fire for the favor. Once fire entered the picture, control of it, not just proximity to it, which likely happened gradually and unevenly across different hominin populations over a very long stretch of time, the entire economy of eating shifted underneath them. Chewing time dropped. Digestive energy dropped. And the calories that used to be spent grinding roots for hours suddenly had somewhere else to go. Evolution, if you'll allow the personification for a moment, does not care about. It has no interest in your afternoon, your mood, or your convenience. It cares about surplus, full stop. And the moment cooking created a calorie surplus, evolution redirected it toward the single most expensive organ in the entire body, one that ounce for ounce, burns through a wildly disproportionate share of your daily energy just to keep the lights on and the thoughts running. Brains are not cheap tenants. Cooking is what finally let your ancestors afford the rent. Jaw muscles shrank because grinding raw fiber for hours a day was no longer the job description. Guts shortened, you don't need a cow-sized digestive tract if the fire already did half the digesting for you before it ever touched your tongue. Teeth got smaller, more delicate, less industrial. And brains, freed from competing with a hungry gut for the same limited fuel supply, kept growing. Slowly at first. Then significantly. Then, eventually, into the thing currently reading these words and wondering what's for dinner. It's a strange trade to sit with. A raw root and a pile of insects, chewed for hours by patient, hungry mouths, is not most people's idea of the origin story of human intelligence. There's no glory in it. No spear held aloft against a sunset, no triumphant music, no slow-motion mammoth collapse. Just millions of years of grinding, digging, cracking, and eventually, almost by accident, discovering that heat did in minutes what teeth used to do in hours, and maybe that's the quietly funny part. You picture human evolution as a triumph of the hunt, muscle, spear, mammoth glory. The truth is closer to a very long, very patient chewing session that eventually got outsourced to a campfire. Your ancestors didn't get smarter because they started fighting harder. They got smarter because something else finally agreed to do the digesting for them, and their bodies, ever the opportunists, took the deal without hesitation. There's a version of this story where fire is the hero, striding in to rescue humanity from a life of grinding tubers. But it's worth remembering that fire didn't do anything on purpose. It doesn't care whether it's cooking your dinner or burning down a forest. What mattered was that a species already primed by 2 million years of foraging, digging, cracking, and scavenging happened to be paying close enough attention to notice what heat could do, and hungry enough to try it. Discovery, it turns out, rewards the already desperate. Which brings it back to tonight. 4 minutes, barely any chewing required, a stove doing in an instant what fire once did more slowly, and your gut once did painfully, hour after hour, root after root. You are, quite literally, running on a shortcut that took 2 million years to build. Every easy bite you take is a small inheritance from a creature that spent hours a day just trying to get through lunch, one grub, one tuber, one fistful of fibrous leaves at a time. So the next time dinner takes less effort than deciding what to watch afterward, it's worth remembering what that effortlessness replaced. Somewhere back along that impossibly long line of ancestors, someone was still chewing, jaw aching, sun going down, no fire yet in sight. And somewhere not long after, someone else discovered flame, and quietly, without knowing it, without meaning to, built the very brain that would one day sit here, comfortable and well-fed, wondering what dinner used to cost. If you want to keep understanding yourself, subscribe. And if you watched this far, what do you want to understand next?